Welcome back, folks. If I sound a little poorly, I'm still recouping from having the nasty virus again. So I don't know what this is going to be like this month, but we're just going to jump straight in, and I want to try and get it done whilst I'm not coughing too much. For those of you who have never been to one of my monthly reflections practice recap videos, then first I'm just going to explore my year ahead spread for March. I've been using the 𝗪𝗁𝗃, the Memento Mori Oracle and my 𝗪𝘀𝗀𝗃 runes. So the rune I got this month was 𝗪𝗂𝗃. I'm still working with the runes in a way where I'm really learning about them still, and their language and how they show up and the poems. I'm really trying to derive something for myself which is experiential, as well as not just my love of sort of book-based, video-based study. And it was a really interesting one, and these selection in general are a prime example of, for me, why working with any presumptions or projections for the future before I get to the month in my year ahead wouldn't necessarily be beneficial for me, because the feeling I had when I pulled these very briefly when I was doing all of my year ahead spread, and then how they showed up, were realms apart. This weather vane card's actually something that I tend to associate with my grandfather, and I hadn't worked with 𝗪𝗂𝗃 much at all. And then I've got the 10 of Pentacles, and honestly it just felt like 2 different months, and I feel like the rune really dominated the essence of my experience. When I end up working with them, they tend to be the one that seems to be right on the money, even in more of a predictive sense, which, like I said, isn't really something I pay too much mind to too often. It really depends what I'm doing. But like in my everyday reading, that's just not my style with the cards. But they do seem to be differentiating themselves quite significantly, and so sort of how the cards then fold into this. The weather vane kind of ended up feeling like a Wheel of Fortune vibe, if I'm honest. It's just that the winds keep changing, things keep stirring up, and this whole idea really, I suppose, of justice, which is always bigger than one person or one community, and the idea of balance, which in many senses goes through states of unbalance consistently to find its form, of which then keeps changing and changing and changing. That kind of made sense to me anyway. But I'm not gonna lie, I was really excited about the 10 of Pentacles, and it was an interesting reality and invitation this month to kind of, I don't know, to kind of reflect on like when and how I'm a space holder, and just not wanting to do it in every single living aspect and breath of my whole entire 24/7, you know, and really looking at the strengthening of courage and fairness, and just where I was putting my efforts in terms of, I think that's what the 10 of Pentacles was really representing. And this isn't too much different from what I said in my Instagram write-up, because it's really hard to explain, and there's a lot of things that I don't wish to share about this month as well, at least in how it showed up in the cards. But when things get challenging in various areas of life at once, one of my invitations is always to recognise what's still solid and good, so as not to kind of get caught up in the external chaos, quite a bit of which wasn't mine, but it was tethered to me through relationships or circumstances. And also a realisation of, I suppose, if you hold a sense of injustice, but you're feeding into it because you're not reinforcing your boundaries, or you're being in places in situations or with people where it's just not going to happen. You're not going to get to a medium where it feels good for the both of you at that time. So I think that I have been mindful of where I want to peacekeep, where I want to show up, rerouting my energy to places that are just going to serve better. And I don't mean just on an individual aspect, I mean on like a larger one. I do feel like this was a bit of a warning to to grab onto what you know, because things are going to really just, I don't know. It was a strange month. And there's this, I suppose the reason that I keep saying that there was a Wheel of Fortune vibe is that there was this sense of coming back to centre. I definitely get an element of sort of strength and courage with this rune, with the frame of trying to be fair across the board, and kind of just, I suppose, finding peace with that and getting to the end of this month and seeing a trimmed down version of when I say the 10 of Pentacles, for me this is very much representative of house, home, family, friends, work, projects, and how that impacts health. Health is kind of an aspect in there, but it wasn't the initiator, although I wasn't actually well. I don't know how to explain it. It's basically like this experience of the weather vane continuously turning in all these wild winds and changing weathers, and then suddenly towards the end of the month it just really slowed down, and it was like, okay, this is the 10 of Pentacles. This is the foundation that is in actual existence, tangibly, physically, at the moment, as to where you stand. Yes, that might change. Yes, maybe it will look like it used to. Maybe it will look completely different. But in this moment, this is the reality of what it looks like, not how sometimes it can be imagined, you know. We're not talking about the imagination. We're not talking about the stories in our head. We're not in a swords card. This is that real, tangible, felt experience. So that's kind of abstract, but that's the best that I can do. That's where I was at with these this month. I don't know if you've ever seen my rune bag before, but it's freaking gorgeous. I love it. You can actually open it out flat, which is why it's got such a long... This is really irritating sometimes, but you can lay it out flat and use it as a casting mat, which is very cool. So yeah, just a brief catch up before we jump into the decks. I spent the first part of the month, very much the end of February as well, but the beginning of March, literally working on Patreon content, really putting my all in and getting it all done within the first 2 weeks, because I was meant to be going away. And I was really excited for that, and I wanted my Patreon to be all running smoothly, and we did some really interesting work with Hedgehog. I actually, do I have the card? Here we go. So this is from one of the Animal Allies deck. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2, sorry. But this was our little representation of Hedgehog, and this month I wanted to get really immersive again. I don't always do such immersive months with the animals. It really just depends on the natural flow of where I'm at. I don't really feel like I'm in a space at the moment where I can content create and plan months in advance. It just doesn't work for me. And it feels kind of stifled creatively as well if I do that. So this month we went right into Hedgehog. I did some sort of folklore storytelling. We looked at the medieval bestiary as well. So kind of a mixture of that. Obviously there was some educational stuff about Hedgehog, as well as the more divinatory meanings and how to work with them in that way, as well as support them in everyday life. some little facties because I'm a nerd and I think that's really fun. But I also created a tarot spread inspired by the 𝗫𝗁𝗔, and I did a Hedgehog in tarot piece where I helped people find ways to make connections with the hedgehog, just as an example animal, and fit them into lots of different tarot cards and help them better see how an animal can show up in different cards and how they might be able to support working with animal tarot decks if they want to, which is something that people ask me often. And so creating a small course on it is something that I would like to do, and it will be on my Patreon. It will be on like the Coven tier, but it's working out how to best do that, because I'm not going to go through all of the animals or all of the 78. It's more about the experience of doing it, and I suppose doing it in a group, because very much when I'm just putting exercises out there, I go through the motions, then people can go and do it and they can share if they want to. But if I put together, you know, a couple of month course, then we'll probably come together and do it on like Skype or Zoom, or I don't know, you know, one of those. So that was really interesting, and I was feeling so fucking proud of myself for getting it all done and up really early on and just keeping an eye on it. I had a meet with a friend from the US, a tarot friend who I've never met before. So I met with the lovely 𝗵𝘀𝗁𝗀 Enchanted. For those of you who might know 𝗵𝘁𝗁, 𝗵𝘁𝗁 is one of the duo of the Wildly Tarot podcast, so 𝗵𝘁𝗁 and Esther. So I actually got to meet 𝗵𝘁𝗁 in real life, and it was freaking awesome. So that was a really high point of my month. And so, yeah, things were looking good, and it just turns out that unfortunately my partner and I contracted the virus again. I already had a long-term form of it, and so unfortunately I'm back in regular hospital appointments, and there seems to be some issues that it has added to again and stirred up again. And so my holiday was kaput, and I am desperately trying to do a catch-up this month and hopefully be able to go away at some point soon. But yeah, it's been surreal. I just want to go back to 2019. And there will be lots of pauses and editing through this due to coughing as well, I'm sure. We'll just get the usual two out of the way, shall we? Because I'm still using them quite a bit, although, you know, significantly less this month. So the Fallen Angels, as always, and I can't remember who I was working with at the beginning of the month, but literally about 2-3 days ago, I pulled this. It's really interesting, this one, because it's actually a fallen gravestone here. I only pulled it 2 days ago, so I haven't done much research on them yet. And then I was looking at a chip. I love this deck, and I really enjoy the cardstock on the Trionfi as well. But it is it's quite a sensitive cardstock, durable, but just like around the edges. But anyway, I used this possibly a couple of times for myself, but I actually did a reading for one of my Patreons who is on my Sacred Space tier, so you can get readings from me there, although the tiers are there's only a few spaces on that tier. The reason being is because they are considerably cheaper than I would do them for elsewhere, so it's kind of a Patreon benefit. I'm also looking to open up readings again, video readings this time though, so big change up, and live readings on Skype. But I did a reading for someone on that tier, and they chose this deck, and it was really, really awesome. It was very funny, to the point of, and obviously I'm not going to give you like any context whatsoever, but there was a sun in one of the pictures. I don't think it was the sun card either. And as I was holding the card up, the sun came streaming through. And it's very rare for the sun to come streaming through in this room. You have to be in this room at the exact point in the day, and it only does it for about 20 minutes because of the building and the way that the window's angled and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden this card just got lit up with the sun right where the actual sun was drawn. It was just kind of a really funny, surreal finale on an otherwise really interesting reading. So these decks, or this deck should I say, is definitely showing up for others as well as me, which is good. I like it when I feel like my decks work in readings for others, especially now I'm getting back into that more. I do like to have like a solid workhorse selection, and this is definitely in it. But let's try these two next. And the reason that I'm showing a tarot and an oracle is just because that's how I've been working this month, and I'm enjoying it. I'm taking what I would refer to as lazier pictures for Instagram, but I'm really enjoying just mixing two decks again and seeing how they work for me. Obviously I've been using them more than I've been sharing, but these two are the Anima Mundi tarot and then the Woodland Wardens oracle. Can never say it. And I really like them together actually. I think that they look awesome. I didn't know if I would want to do the whole doubling up on the animal thing, but it works really, really well together actually. And I don't know, they feel like they speak to each other. It doesn't kind of rock my focus that there's different animals on the card, but again, unfair advantage, right? I work with animals constantly, but what I would say is that both of these decks, it's very easy to just take the animal at face value in terms of on the card, because these have keywords on them, and because obviously this is a tarot deck. We know that the Hanged One, sort of a set thing, depending on how you work I suppose, but sort of a set thing from deck to deck to deck, and then some of us infuse other layers like the art, like the symbolic representation. I know that I do, but I don't feel like I have to with this particular deck, which is why I imagine that it's so popular, other than the fact it is really beautiful and very well thought and put together. But there's the keyword, or in this case, I suppose, technically two keywords. So moth and eucalyptus, there's an ending. And then we've got the Hanged Man and that kind of, I suppose, idea of being suspended in the process of sitting in an ending, not trying to rush it. Like there's something about this process that we have to be in. And what I often say to people is when we rush endings and grief, especially because that tends to come in with endings. We have good endings, it's just they're not as regular, I feel. But I would very much get the sense from these that it's saying don't rush it, because when we do rush them, it just comes back up later. It's like trying to hold one of those beach balls underwater. You know, if you've not taken the air out of it, it's just going to come up and pop you in the face at some point. And that's what I feel like rushing the process of like grief or healing or just anything really. It's got that sensation. I really like that they've got a similar kind of colour going on between the spider and the moth. But anyway, do you see what I mean? Like we didn't really have to talk about moth or spider at all. And then for me, I would dive into that more. And there's a few cards that just don't have animals on it whatsoever. It is a strange deck. I really love the Anima Mundi Tarot, but the fact that it's done that thing, they'll have like usually sometimes 3 suits where the suits are far more what I would call scenic, even if it's a scenic pip, but they're more scenic. And then we get more base level pips in one suit. For the longest time that was very popular in the wands, which is in this suit. I've seen it come up a lot recently with pentacles in some of the like Insight Edition decks and stuff like that. It doesn't bother me so much because I really love the artwork. I think it's a really good working deck. If I wasn't as into it, then it definitely wouldn't stay, if that makes sense. But it just seems like a strange choice. It's literally just strange. I had been using the Woodland Wardens with the 𝗬𝗁𝗁𝗀, but I really wanted to branch out and use it with something else. And they work, like I said, deliciously together. And then the last two, this is the Reclaim Oracle and the Dark Days Tarot. And one of the things I had been doing this month, because it was National Poetry Day, Worldwide Poetry Day, I don't know. It was a poetry day. And my friend Kim and I have been doing tarot and poetry sit-ins since, I want to say, at least 2017 on Instagram. We love mixing tarot and poetry. Originally for that day I actually pulled the Woodland Wardens and the Anima Monday, but since then I have been using these two together and either doing some more tarot oracle poetry or just kind of, I suppose, what I would refer to as like creative rhythmic styled journaling. So it could be considered poetic, and I have like notes on my iPhone and my laptop that stem back ages, and many of which I've never shared, but some of them I'll either go back to and decide to randomly share because it's fun or it feels like the time, or I will share one that I have worked through of and in the moment. But it is something that I definitely enjoy about these two decks. They feel very kind of poetic to me in the way that they express themselves. And like the Dark Days Tarot is definitely not something that I would call too traditional. And then the Reclaim Oracle is, it very much reminds me of the vibe of the, I want to say, Iris Oracle. I always forget its name, but I use it loads, which I probably should have got out actually. 1 second. It goes really beautifully with these two as well. Not just based on aesthetics, although that is very evident, but honestly, this deck has always been massively underrated in my opinion. It seems to be getting a second wind of appreciation lately. But this was one of the first decks that I used as an oracle when I started reading for people online in 2017. When I mean reading, like doing actual readings, not just pick a card, you know, personal private readings. And it used to get requested a lot by a recurring client in particular. I freaking love this card. I have had this on a few rough days before. You can't find goodness because you lost your heart. Oof. Oh, it's very much could have fit in with my month. Yeah. It's just freaking awesome. And I love it. I really enjoy the artwork. There's something about it that feels very free and wild. Feels very much like an adult journal to me, but it feels very raw. And I know that they created this deck during a time of, it says something in the book about healing from turmoil or going through like something. So this is another one of those decks where I would say you can feel the spirit of that and the intent of that. It's very much a felt experience in the same way that I would say the Lioness Oracle Tarot is. So I just thought I would talk about that one quickly as well. I will probably leave it out. Maybe I will use all three of them together, although these can be rough. They can be rough. So it could be like a gut punch, but don't they look awesome together? I'm leaning into avoiding my perfectionism and being glad that I have managed to sit down and catch up with a few of you who genuinely like these and just say hey, because I've been in bed and I am so sore from not moving enough, because that's a problem with my body and my issues that I have already. And it's been really, really depressing, to be honest. It's been hard. So any kind of way to shake that up at the moment is really welcome. And we'll finish off with a little clip from my garden. Thanks for hanging out, folks.